I'm recording this because I just watched Vice President Biden's speech, and I'm trying to imagine a time where an armed insurrection of, say, Black Lives Matter was greeted by a Republican president elect who came out and said, "I'm sorry." And I'm trying to imagine where a Republican president elect would talk about the violent BLM protesters and say, "Oh, they're just a few extremists. It's not who we are." I'm I'm beyond upset, and I believe Vice President Biden should have watched President Bush's bullhorn speech before he came out with that pathetic, sad, wimpy, just terrible, depressing speech that he gave. Okay, but I'm not going to leave you hanging, Mr. President elect. I'll help you out here. Here's what you should have done. You should have walked out confidently to the lectern, taken off your mask, and said, "Our Capitol building is under a violent insurrection, and for this, we will not stand. We will not stand an assault on America." Every elected official took an oath to the Constitution of the United States to defend that Constitution, to uphold and defend that Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Well, these are domestic enemies. President Biden, President-elect Biden, you should have called out the Republicans from the beginning, because allowing them to get off the hook and make an excuse that this is just a handful of violent extremists, completely misreads what's going on in this country. The 74 million people who voted for President Trump are mostly watching the news, cheering these traitors on. They're cheering their Confederate flags. They're cheering their NRA memberships. They're cheering their "Don't Tread on Me" and all the rest. They're the Proud Boys and Boogaloo Boys and all the rest of the craziness. An appropriate response from you, after identifying that this insurrection cannot stand, isn't to say that the American people won't stand for it, because the American people are standing for it. We're sitting here. We're waiting for someone to take action. We're watching the Capitol Hill police treat these guys with kid gloves. Let them go right through the rotunda. Let them get into the chamber. And I'm the average white guy, but I bet there's millions of black people out there watching the news thinking, if these protesters were black, they would have all been gunned down. Every last one of them. Police would have drawn guns, and it would have been the Kent State protests in 1970 times 1,000. There would be blood everywhere. Police wouldn't be there going, "Oh, don't, don't try to control yourself." No way. No way. The appropriate response, Mr. President-elect, would be to say, the Capitol is under attack, and President Trump is responsible for this attack. President Trump is the one who has used violent rhetoric for most of his term. President Trump is the one who gave the speech this morning to talk about defending the country against bad people. President Trump's personal lawyer, Mr. Giuliani, is the one who went out there and said that they need combat. Mr. Vice President-elect, Mr. President-elect, the appropriate response would have been to say, "President Trump, you need to immediately step down. Resign your position immediately. Go on TV, go on Twitter, go on social media, tell your supporters that they're wrong, that they have to stop, that the election was fine, and you've made a huge mistake. And if you don't do that immediately, your only other choice is to step down and call out all of those Republican senators and congressmen and governors and state reps and all the rest of them who have supported the violence, who have enabled Mr. Trump. He didn't get here by himself. This protest of the vote, it's not Mr. Trump by himself. There's how many congressional representatives? How many senators? Call on all of them to step down. You need to tell them you took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You've failed. You have not upheld that oath. The only appropriate measure to take at this point is for all of you to step down. We have to send a message that this isn't going to be tolerated. And your speech, Mr. Vice President, said, well, it's just a few bad apples, and it's okay, and blah blah. I'm devastated that we don't have leadership in this country that will take a real stand, because the other side, the side that's attacking this country, they don't walk out and apologize. They don't treat us with kid gloves. They're vicious. They're vicious even when we follow all the rules. We don't even stand up when they've got an armed, violent insurrection. We give mealy-mouthed, wishy-washy, ridiculous, pathetic speeches. Fix it, please.